Happy Independence Day to you and your family from the people who help you to discover, protect, and share true financial independence. The GenWealth Radio Hour is in full swing. John Shrewsbury in for Scott Inman, who is vacationing. Janet Walker, my business partner for this month, 21 years at GenWealth, 24 years since we've been working together.
Yeah, I was just now thinking about that in relation to Independence Day, 250 years for our nation. To think that we have been working together almost 10% of the life of this nation, that's a long time, John.
You know, you could have said a lot of things, and I would have felt really a lot better going into this show than you telling me I'm old. Okay.
Rolling right along.
Yes, let's just jump into some things that are going on. Speaking of independence and hotter than the 4th of July, the weather's hot, the economy is hot, inflation is heating up again, Janet.
It is.
A key inflation gauge jumps to a 3-year high as a sign of affordability challenges. And that was the headline just this past week. And I think that anytime we begin to talk about inflation, we kind of have a little bit of stress going on because of the inflation that we had a couple of 3 years ago, where inflation got up 8, 9, 10%, something like that for a short period of time.
Right.
This time, Janet, it's real, but it is not as bad as what we have experienced in the recent past.
So, John, when people start talking about inflation, one of the most common points that they discuss is gas prices. Oh, it costs this much to fill up my vehicle. And I get it. It's a real thing. Been there, done that. I understand it. I drive a pickup truck, y'all. It takes a minute to fill up that tank and a few more dollars than it used to. So I understand that. But I also want to remind everybody that we have a tendency to feel like now is the worst ever, and there's some significant recency bias when we talk about fuel prices in particular. So just as kind of a point of clarification on where we are, yes, we are seeing inflation, but let's go back to where it was the highest. I checked on prices for gasoline in the Little Rock metropolitan area. Right now, on average, it's about $3.41 a gallon. But if you go back to 2022, in June of 2022, so 4 years ago, instead of the current $3.41, it was $4.56.
Makes a big difference.
It does. And I'm not saying that the prices that we have right now are easy, but just as a point of clarity, you know what? You've already lived through $4.56 a gallon. You did that once. And maybe you're at a different phase of life. Maybe you're a little bit financially more stable. Maybe not so much. But you've done it before. You can do it again. And I think it's important, regardless of which aspect of inflation is hitting your wallet the hardest. I think it's important to just kind of take that reality check of like the job of media in general is to get your attention, and they get your attention with bad news, not good news. And so there's going to be a focus on it's so bad. You know what? We've seen worse before. It's okay.
Yeah, and there's a government component to this, the PCE, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, which is the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge, just jumped to its highest reading in 3 years. Now, that's in the last 3 years. And that obviously signals that inflation is kind of heating up a little bit. But again, as Janet has pointed out, we've been there and seen this before. Categories hitting hardest include everyday expenses like foods and services. The Fed faces a tough choice: cut rates to support the economy or hold them high to fight inflation. So that's kind of the challenge that we've got right now is, what is the Fed to do? I know the president installed a new Fed chairman with the expressed intent, at least, to lower interest rates. But they kept rates where they are right now because there is this problem that if you lower rates too far, then inflation can get out of control. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of, if you go back to the 2022 era, we had way too much money in the economy chasing way too few goods, and that's what prompted the inflation in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go back to all the free money that was floating around after COVID, let's hang out on the inflation point for just a little bit more here, John. One of the things that we think as GenWealth financial advisors that we think is very important for pre-retirees and retirees to hear in this conversation about inflation is if you do not have a plan in place to address inflation, I want you to think about something for just a moment. If you were to start work, let's say in your 20s, day one, and you knew you were going to work there for the next 30 years, would you take the job if your employer said they were never going to give you a raise? There's no way that you would do it, regardless of how much they start out paying you. There's no way you would take that without an increase in your income in the future. The same needs to be true of your retirement. You have to be able to plan for increased income throughout retirement. And I'm just going to tell you, the increase that you get in Social Security is not going to make up that difference. So be sure that you're planning for inflation to be a reality in your retirement.
Janet, the GenWealth Ready to Retire process that all of our retirement income clients go through here at GenWealth is designed to give periodic inflation increases because that's what we do. That's reality. You just described something that is really not real. Nobody's going to work for 30 years. Nobody's going to live for 30 years without being able to increase their income. And to keep up with inflation, that is very key.
Right.
Okay, so we've got inflation kind of nailed there. Let's talk about mortgage rates. If you want to talk about something that really has people kind of bound up, it's mortgage rates.
Yeah.
Average 30-year U.S. mortgage rates rise to 6.49%. Little changed in its range over the past 6 weeks. I know I've said this on the show before, but 6.49% is much more like what is normal for mortgage rates. I think we got really, really spoiled by 2 and 3 and 4% mortgages.
Yeah, as my family finishes the final few years on our mortgage, we're below 3%, and I'm so grateful for that. But there were times in our life when, frankly, we didn't have the disposable income that we have now, and we were paying above 7%. And I remember times that my dad talked about, and gosh, bless him, I don't know how he did this, but on land payments as he was buying additional land as a farmer, that was in the 80s, and CDs were paying double-digit interest rates. Well, if CDs were paying double-digit, then guess what? He was paying double-digit on the loan that he had for land, and so all of that, kind of like what we had the discussion on inflation, to say that I know that you've got some recency bias, and looking at 6.49%, you're going, I'd like to go back to the days of 3%, but don't put your life on hold for this. Like, if your family needs to move forward, we're not going to see 3% for a while. So be grateful that we're not looking at double-digit interest rates, and figure out within the realm of reason what this means for your family.
Here's the difference between a 6.49% mortgage rate today and a 6.49 mortgage rate, let's say 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. The difference is the affordability of the house. We have seen home prices skyrocket during this time. So 6.49% tells part of the story. The price tag of the house tells the other part.
And that's absolutely on point. And there may be people who, for that reason, need to continue to rent for a period of time, and that's okay. Don't rush through life so much that you're putting yourself in a tight place financially by getting into a mortgage that's too much for you. But also, I would say, don't put it on hold. Like, find the balance. We're all about balance here at GenWealth. Find the balance between what your desires are and what your financial reality is.
I think the reality, though, Janet, is that you shouldn't wait for 3% rates to come back around.
Right.
That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, not anytime soon.
Yeah. So mortgage rates, again, you are affected, your payment is affected by how much you borrow. How much you borrow depends on how much equity you have in your current home or how much down payment you've got. So there's a lot of things there. A great thing to do is to get some advice from a financial advisor to talk about the affordability of any particular mortgage in your budget.
You bring up a valid point, John. I think a lot of people, particularly in thinking about GenWealth, we focus so much on retirement income planning that I think sometimes people aren't aware that they can talk about decisions like this with a financial advisor.
Absolutely.
We do very holistic financial planning, and that includes, hey, should I buy this house? And if so, how much do we put down? And just having somebody come alongside you in that decision-making process could make all the difference for you.
Now, we said at the top of the show that the weather was hot and the economy was hot. The economy is hot. It expanded at a solid 2.1% rate January through March, according to the government, upgrading its last estimate. So clearly, things are going pretty well with the economy. Janet, I think that sometimes when people may be struggling themselves in their own personal economy financially, they may have a view that the economic picture across the country is pretty rough. I don't think that that is the case. And we have been very bullish on the American economy for a long period of time. And I continue to be that way, with maybe some pockets of exception.
John, I was at I won't say specifically, I was at a group venue where somebody I respect greatly was speaking, but they're not a financial person at all. And the person made reference to, man, when the economy is this bad, da 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 da. And I leaned over to my husband and I went, it's the economy's not bad, but it's all about what is your circle of news saying and what's happening in your world. But GDP, so gross domestic product, that is a lagging indicator. We talk about leading indicators and lagging indicators. It is a lagging indicator. So after things have already happened, it's telling us where things are. So it tells you where the economy has been, not where it's going. But we're getting some solid numbers there in terms of what GDP is telling us at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the next subject really quick, also economy related. The U.S. jobless aid filings fall to 215,000 last week as layoffs remain low despite economic headwinds. Now, that headline is kind of written kind of oddly, but let me explain. 215,000 people filed for unemployment is what that basically says, and that is a low part of a reading for all of the people who are unemployed. But clearly, Janet, when you combine GDP growth and kind of tepid unemployment, you've got a pretty decent economy. And I think that, when you have a strong labor market, that also kind of causes the Fed to go, okay, we've got this strong labor market. I don't know that we need to cut rates. I think we maybe need to hold those rates in place because they're, again, trying to keep inflation low. So it's really interesting to see how all of this kind of combines and works together. But let's also talk a little bit about jobless claims and I want to get sort of circle back to the economy, and I want to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, because there has been a great deal of fear pumped into the mindset of people about how AI is going to wreck the job market.
And I think it all depends on what industry you're in and, frankly, what company you work for and what their approach is going to be. And if you're not in the job force yet, like I am a parent to kids whose age ranges, there we go, I'll get it out in a minute, from 19 to 23. So they are just very early in the workforce. And John, you and I have had conversations about a lot of the jobs that are being taken by AI are more of those starter jobs. I foresee a time period where we have fewer future CEOs who can say, well, I started out in the mailroom, I did the most basic job that there ever was in the company. Those types of stories, because those types of jobs are being done more and more frequently by AI. I was talking with a young man who's a friend of my son's, and his degree program that when he started out 4.5 years ago was great, and he's graduated, he's got his undergraduate degree, but that realm, his area has completely changed because of AI. And so he's going back now and getting a master's degree in something else that would require more human input. And we're seeing a lot of that. So, but he's not the type of person, because of his stage of life, who would file a jobless claim.
Right.
Now, we know that he should at this point have a job because that was the plan, but he's not going to show up on these reports. And I think that there's a significant amount of that we're not catching in the data yet.
Janet, you will know this name when I say it. Maybe our listeners may tacitly know the name. Rick Edelman, who is a colleague of ours in the financial industry, a prolific writer about all things investments, the economy, and all of that type of thing. He wrote a book called The Truth About Your Future. And he talks about the fact that we will move into a time, and we're already seeing this now, where you kind of go and reinvent yourself periodically. And you go and maybe, take some courses and learn some new things and what have you, as opposed to you learn everything that you needed to know in college, and then that rode you all the way through your life. The world is changing way too fast to be resting on your laurels. I think that this ought to be an economic, a jobs, economy and markets challenge to people to go bow up and let's get better at what we're doing.
Well, think about, John, what changed from your parents' generation to your generation, and you and I are like maybe half a generation apart. But even between your age group and mine, and then to the next generation, that shift in, like you were saying, like the first generation in this timeline that we're talking about, they went and got a job, and where they started is where they finished, and they had a pension, and they were there, forever. But in like my age group, people not only change jobs, but they change entire career paths. And I think you're right, though, where we're headed is whether you're going to keep working in the same career or the same company, you still will have to reinvent yourself. But we've seen that at GenWealth a lot. In fact, in the room with us right now is a team member who has gone, hey, I really want to take some time and focus on AI and what it can do for GenWealth. And that's something that a year and a half ago we weren't thinking about, but
he wasn't hired to do that when he was hired.
No, he was hired for another reason, and he's reinventing himself here now. And so that reinvention, I think, is going to be very necessary. The question is, does it keep you in the same company or does it take you elsewhere? But the reinvention, I think, is going to be a necessity.
I think the takeaway from the What's Happening segment today, Janet, is regardless of whether you're talking about prices, whether you're talking about unemployment, whether you're talking about job security, anything of that nature, I think the key is to be flexible and to be able to morph yourself into whatever the circumstances might present. I think you have to be nimble in the current economy.
Absolutely.
All right, that is the What's Happening segment. The Get Ready for the Future show begins right now.
You've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Helping people to discover, protect, and share true financial independence is the mission of GenWealth Financial Advisors, and we're bringing it to you on Independence Day here at the Get Ready for the Future show. John Shrewsbury and Janet Walker in for Scott Inman, who is vacationing. And Janet, I, for one, am very, very happy to be celebrating 250 years of our country's existence.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be celebrating this month 21 years of GenWealth's existence.
Yes.
And then you and I have been business partners for 24 years.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies. My mom came over this weekend and gave my kids a couple of gifts, and you never know what you're going to get from the grandparents,
Of course.
And so Anyway, with the birthday, the 250th birthday of the United States coming up, she is very history minded with my two kids, especially because of how much they love history. She gave them each a book about the 250 years of the United States of America and the history, and put a note in the front of it. The first people in our ancestors came over in 1630, and so she made a note in there that almost 400 years ago we had people who were here in what would ultimately become the United States. So we're elated about 250 years.
Absolutely. So let's get to your questions today. Of course, you can send us your questions at a variety of ways. You can text them to 501-381-5228 or email us at show@getreadyforthefuture.com. The first question today comes from Trevor in Benton. My parents are in their 80s and still have their original wills from the 1980s. Should we update it now? Wow, old wills can cause all kinds of problems and cause new problems, really,
yes.
Janet, because let's really talk about when and why it is time to refresh someone's estate plan.
Well, I'm just going to say if it's been 40 years, yes, update it. That's the short answer. But let's develop this a little bit because there's a whole lot of information here for other people to be able to learn from. So first of all, let's talk about a will in and of itself as compared to other documents that are often included in estate planning. It is a common misperception, Trevor, that people think that all that they need is a will, but I think it's really important to understand what documents do and what they don't do. The goal for most people when they talk about having a will, what they really want to do is to avoid probate. A will is not going to avoid probate for you. In the state of Arkansas, looking at a trust, that's what you really want to consider. And we're not attorneys, we're not giving financial advice, but we've been around long enough to see, what the difference is on this and to be able to say that's something that you really need to consider having your parents do is full-fledged estate planning. To include things like having their home owned by the trust. If you look up our home as an example, it's not owned by Stephen and Janet Walker. It's owned by the Stephen and Janet Walker Family Revocable Trust, so that if something happens to me and my husband, then at the point that we are deceased and our kids have, as the successor trustees, they have the death certificates in hand, they could decide immediately to sell the house, to keep the house, whatever they want to do, they can do that because that house belongs to the trust, where if it belonged to us as a couple, then our kids would have to go through probate, which in Arkansas is a minimum of 6 months and can go up to 2 years in time period. And I'm just using the house as one example because it's very tangible and people understand that, but there are lots of other things to consider in this.
Yeah, and family circumstances over 40 years have probably absolutely changed.
Yeah.
There's been marriages, maybe divorces, grandchildren's,
maybe death.
Grandchildren.
Yeah, I noticed it. I wasn't going to say it, but yeah.
Grandchildren have come along. Deaths of named beneficiaries, changes in financial status. Any of these could really mean that the will is really no longer what you really need. It may not be in effect. It may not be valid at that particular point in time. So, you could have assets passing, frankly, to the wrong people in that situation.
Another thing, Trevor, that gets my attention in terms of the types of documents that if I were in your shoes, I would want my parents to have these conversations, and that is about powers of attorney. With them being in their 80s, you just never know what tomorrow holds. And for you to be able to, whether it's you or another family member, for somebody they trust to be able to come alongside them and to be able to handle financial matters for them and healthcare decisions for them when at some point they're no longer able to do that. It's very important that they go ahead and make those decisions now while they are still mentally, cognitively capable of making those decisions, and just get everything documented in advance. And then I would also address beneficiary designations. when you think about things like IRAs, 401ks, and life insurance policies, those are beneficiarizable assets where your house, as an example, is not. But you can literally put a beneficiary, fill out a beneficiary line on the documents with those other accounts, and those can bypass probate even if there's not a trust in place. So I think it's a good opportunity not only to update the will, but to take the time to take a holistic approach to what are all the things that at some point you're going to have to deal with or for your mom and dad.
The conversation, Janet, I think about when you try to approach parents who are in their 80s, who have had a document in place for 40 plus years. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's sacred. It's almost like it's, we can't touch that. That's our estate plan. That's our will. And so let's talk a little bit about how you might approach that conversation to get them to understand why it's critical to update this.
I just don't think it has to be that complex. And my family's probably weird on this, but we talk about stuff like this all the time. We have recurring conversations so that we make sure that everything is up to date, because here's the deal. Last I checked, ain't none of us getting out of here alive. So newsflash, there you go. That's the reality of it. So let's be prepared. And if your parents love you, then they're going to want things to be as easy on you as possible. So even starting the conversation with something as simple as, Mom, Dad, I'm really glad that, back in the 80s that you guys did what you did in terms of getting a will in place. I'm grateful that you took that first step. Do you mind if we sit down together and review that and see if it's still what you want? And I'm going to tell you that when you have that conversation and you start reviewing that document, they're going to pretty quickly see it's not still what they want. There have been lots of changes since then, and they'll see the need to update it, at which point you can then also share with them the need maybe for some of these other documents to also be taken care of. And John, how do they, if it's a fit, if it's a match for GenWealth to provide that for them, how do they do that? What does that look like
absolutely. Here? Murray Tudor on our team is our in-house estate planning specialist, and she would love to help your family walk through the details of getting an estate plan in place, or maybe even updating an estate plan. This is exactly the kind of situation that she navigates every day. Mm-hmm. She is not an attorney, but she does guide you through a process that we have here at GenWealth that allows for you to create will, durable power of attorney, trust if necessary, advanced directives, healthcare directives, things of that nature. All of those things are very, very critical. The other thing that I think about in this situation, Janet, is where those documents are stored. Because it used to be that, you put these things in the safe deposit box at the bank and it was hard to get into, and when somebody passed away or
in the physical safe at the house, and everybody questioned every once in a while, like, Dad told me where that combination was. Where is it?
Yes. So that's another conversation that needs to be had. And in this day and time, we've got electronic vaults that these documents can be stored in, and it's certainly something that we believe that estate planning is one of the most loving things that you can do for your parents. And this is a conversation that really does need to be had. If you want to talk with us about that, just reach out to us, 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. Or you can email us at info@getreadyforthefuture.com. All right, our next question comes from Robin. It came to us via email. Robin writes, we are in our mid-50s and have no pension. Should we consider buying an annuity for guaranteed income? Robin, no pension doesn't necessarily mean no paycheck. Here's why an annuity might make sense, and at times when it does not. And I think that Robin is really kind of honing in, Janet, from our perspective, why someone should consider an annuity, and that is if they need additional guaranteed income on top of what they already have.
Yeah, so let's talk about guaranteed income and what that really means and kind of where we're coming from on that. When we sit down with a couple that is preparing to go into retirement, one of the first and most important questions that we need to answer in the planning process is, what amount of money do you have to have every month? What is your required income need? And in some cases, and I'll just give some examples here, if somebody says, well, we must have $4,000 a month, and let's say that we look at their Social Security income and it's going to provide $4,000 a month, and they're going to be retired when, that money's going to be coming in at the time that they retire, then they have enough guaranteed income because that check's going to be there for them. But many times we see a gap. So let's say that they say we have to have $5,000 a month, and their Social Security is only going to make up $4,000. Well, there's a $1,000 gap there. Is there ever a time when it would be okay for you to not have that? And there's not. If it's required every month. And so that's where, in our minds, in the way that we plan at GenWealth, that is where we rely on an annuity, because it is the only other product beyond, and Social Security is not a product, but it's the only other income source that can provide you a guaranteed income stream like that. And John, I want to take some time next to really talk about the different types of annuities, because there are so many types, and some of them are not intended really to do what we do with retirement income planning.
Yeah, let me pause for just a second, Janet, because before we get into the types of annuities, I think that our compliance department would probably string me up and drag me across the parking lot out here. And
here's the disclosure.
If I did not say that, annuities are not for everybody. They do come with fees and administrative charges, surrender charges, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. Also, that if you take any money out of an annuity that is considered to be gain or principal, it is subject to a 10% premature withdrawal penalty prior to 59 and a half. That's exactly why we don't recommend anybody take a withdrawal out of an annuity before 59 and a half. So all of that being said, you have to go through what I would call a due diligence process to make sure that the annuity is right for you before you ever pull the trigger on it. And I think that is something that everyone should do. But that does not mean you should turn your back on a guaranteed income source that could solve a problem for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk through a little bit about the different types of annuities, John. Fixed annuities, they've got a predictable rate. They're low risk, but they're also low reward. I think a lot of times people don't think about those two going together. They go, well, I don't want to take much risk. Well, that's fine if you don't need much reward, but usually there are some dollars where you can be low risk and other dollars where you can increase that risk. Not that it's high, but it's higher risk level. So a fixed annuity is not going to pay you very much in terms of the return that you're getting on that, but it is appropriate in some cases. John, next we have fixed indexed annuities.
Yeah, a fixed indexed annuity is sort of a hybrid between an investment product and a guaranteed interest rate. What you have is an interest rate that is paid on an indexed annuity that is somehow tied to, loosely, let me say, tied to market performance. Why do I say loosely? Well, there are caps and participation rates and things of that nature that dictate how much that annuity is credited in terms of interest each year. So a fixed indexed annuity, or sometimes just referred to as an indexed annuity, can be a bit confusing, and it's sort of a middle ground. Now, what you give up in terms of that upside potential with those caps and participation rates, you actually get on the downside because there is no downside risk to a fixed indexed annuity. You can't lose money in one of those contracts, but you can gain, and you can gain potentially more than what the prevailing interest rate is. You're just not going to track a market performance step by step in most cases.
Right, and when you say you can't lose money, just to clarify, that's if you leave it in there for the period of time that it's supposed to stay, because there's no market risk, to be clear. Exactly. So now let's talk about variable annuities. Variable annuities are going to be tied to sub-account investment performance, and depending on the company and the product that you're using, that can range greatly in terms of what's included in those sub-accounts. But you have the opportunity, the way that we use them, you have the opportunity to have a floor of guaranteed income, and to also have the opportunity to get some market growth over a period of time. There are some that come with special death benefits as well. So there's all kinds of different ways to structure this. But based on the question from Robin, her issue was that they do not have a pension. Should we consider buying an annuity for guaranteed income? The reason we like something like the variable annuity in the way that we use them is that it provides that floor. So remember, when we talked about Social Security, if it was going to provide $4,000 and they need $5,000 a month, then it can cover that gap of income for them. But it also can give an opportunity for increased income over time. It's not a guarantee, but we at least know that the $5,000 total is going to be covered, and they have the opportunity to potentially keep up with and beat inflation.
Let's talk about the fee question for just a second.
Sure.
There is no question that any investment has some sort of fee, whether it is blatant, explicit, or implicit and hidden in the product itself. There is always a cost. But the question has to be, is that cost worth the benefit that I'm getting? If the cost exceeds the benefit, that doesn't make any sense. But if the cost is in line with the benefit that you're getting, and that benefit is the guaranteed income, as Janet said, it is the only type of investment product that is out there that can give you a guarantee based on the claims paying ability of the insurance company that you're with. It is the only product on the planet that allows you to do that. And so I think that there has to be a good, healthy examination of fees, and not is there a fee, because most people are just kind of almost naturally conditioned to be fee phobic. I don't want to pay any fees. Well, what you don't want to do is you don't want to pay any fees that are excessive or out of line with the benefit that you're getting.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. Most people don't buy anything just solely based on the cost. You don't buy your house based on the cost. You don't buy your car based on the cost. You buy it on the basis of what value does it provide you for the need that you have.
Well, and I think people are blind to, they're often blind to different types of fees. John, you referenced this in how you were setting it up about sometimes fees are obvious and sometimes they're not. And let me use, as a contrast, a CD at a bank. People would say that there's no fee there, but there is, because if the bank is paying you, I don't know, let's say you're getting 3%, well, they're taking that money that you've got at the bank and they're turning around and loaning it to somebody else to build a house at 6.5%.
Yeah, your fee is the market difference in the market rate on money. Yeah,
they're making money on your money while it's there, which is fine, but you don't see that as a cost. It is a cost, and that's what's happening in that particular scenario. So there's a cost really to everything. You just have to understand, like John said, understand how the product works in terms of the cost, and I think most importantly what the benefit is and what that means to you.
The plan is to build a plan, not buy a product. And if the product fits your plan, then it may have some validity. I think that's a conversation that you have with your financial advisor, but the plan has got to come first, and an annuity might be part of that plan, but only after you understand the full picture. That question, Janet, is the question of the week. Congrats to Robin, and thanks for reaching out with your question. We'd love to send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being the question of the week. Email us, Robin, at show@getreadyforthefuture.com to claim that tumbler. Next up is Katie from Little Rock. My husband is a spender and I'm a saver. That's a kind of a common thing. How do we find common ground in retirement planning? Janet, I don't know how many times that we have seen couples come in and one's a spender and one's a saver.
Yeah, opposites attract, absolutely, for sure, but they need a plan. And we're going to talk a little bit about how couples can get aligned, even if you're not wired the same way financially. That's okay. You can ultimately get on the same page financially. One of the keys, I think, in this is not for one of you to just, well, let me rephrase this. Neither one of you needs to just dig your heels in and go, we're going to do it my way. Because if you do that, you're never going to get on the same page. So there's got to be compromise from both sides of the equation. One of the things that we would recommend is for the saver, as you go through and do your budget, which I'm sure you have because you've said that you're a self-proclaimed saver. So as you go through the budget, call the spender over and let them chime in. Give them one thing, and they can pick one thing that they are in charge of and that they get to change, and don't have a coronary when they change it. Let them change it, because by them changing that one thing, what's happening is they're taking ownership and getting to a point of agreement on everything else that is in that budget.
And that one thing can't be all of our discretionary income. I'm in charge of that, right?
Right. I
Okay.
mean, you do. It has to be logical, but the other thing I would say is give them some spending money. Like we have fund money as a line item in the budget, and I will tell you, I don't care where it goes and what it gets spent on. It's there, and it's okay. Now there was a time when we couldn't do that, and there have been times when that was a very small amount, but it's okay. It's been there for as long as we could feasibly make it work. It's important to have that, especially when there is a spender in the marriage. You've got to give them some flexibility to be who they are, so that they in turn will give you flexibility to be who you are.
So let's talk a little bit about a structure, a framework that might be able to work in a situation like this. It's called the yours, mine, and ours structure. One account within the household takes in all the money and handles the household expenses and the retirement savings. Because the original question, Janet, was how do we find common ground in retirement planning?
Right.
Well, last I checked, that both of you are going to need to retire.
Mm-hmm.
So both of you ought to be on the same page about what it's going to take to retire and how you're going to fund it. So if you fund that out of that joint account, if you will, then you are both figuratively contributing to retirement. Now, what probably is happening is that probably there is a contribution coming out of his paycheck to a 401k, out of her paycheck to a 401k.
Right.
But if that's not the case, if you're funding IRAs or whatever the case may be, then you probably want to do that from that joint account. And then let's let each person have a discretionary account after all of the essential expenses are taken care of. And I think that gives license to spend a certain amount of money to each person. And if one person is more bent to saving, they can save. And if one person is more bent to spending, they can spend, but they are limited to the amount of money that is in those discretionary accounts.
Yeah, it kind of becomes like the fund money line in the budget, just depending on how you want to approach your how you handle money as a couple. If you separate it as his, hers, and theirs, this is a great way to do it, because his money is his money and her money is her money, and there will be no judgment about how it's used after the household is covered.
There will be no judgment.
There will be no judgment.
Okay, so let's talk about this retirement plan, because I think it's very critical that you know where you're going. And I think the only way for you to know where you're going is to put together the plan that shows you how to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the driving dictate for how much money comes out of each paycheck, or how much money comes out of that joint account and goes to retirement planning. Because there can be a thought, and I've seen this with clients that have come in before, Janet, that we're putting too much money away for retirement. He's just stacking up all these things for the future. We can't have anything right now.
Well, and the other spouse is just in the opposite boat.
Right.
And so we absolutely, John, you and I've joked about this. We feel like sometimes we're as much marriage counselors as we are financial advisors.
It can be that way sometimes.
Because when people come, people feel very emotionally strong about money, whether it's good feelings or bad feelings. The emotion is strong most of the time, and so they come to these conversations with either fear or confidence, or whatever it might be. And they often come from different backgrounds financially. And it's one thing going through your working years like that when there's a consistent stream of income coming in. It's another thing when you're on the precipice of retirement And things are about to look very different without working paychecks coming into the household anymore. And John, I frankly believe this is one of the significant contributors to what's called silver divorce, where in retirement people can't get on the same page. So I really believe that it's critical to take the time to go through this together. And we see many times when people will walk through and put together a plan as a couple that they both come to a degree of compromise and kind of meet each other somewhere. I'm not going to say in the middle. Usually it is more times more on the side of the saver than on the spender, but it's because the reality of the numbers soaks in, and for the spender to be able to see, oh my goodness, if we continue at the rate that I would like to continue, we're never going to be able to retire. But if we adjust it just this much, then we can make some changes and still have some fun.
Yeah, you don't have to be the same kind of spender, but you do have to want the same kind of future.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you've got to find the agreement. All right, our last question today on the Get Ready for the Future show comes from Roger up in Fayetteville. He says, we've saved enough to retire, but I'm afraid I'll get bored. I can relate. Should I keep working just to stay busy? Well, okay, Roger, I will tell you that you and I share a kindred spirit, because I am at retirement age, but I love what I do, and I have no idea what I have taken up an old hobby of hitting the tennis ball a little bit.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I can only do that about an hour or two a session, and I'm done.
You're at a stereotypical retirement age, but you're not at John's retirement stage.
Not at all.
Because you want to keep working, and that's okay. For me, I'm actually working through, it's still years out for me, but I am actually working through a plan now for what will I retire to. We've been talking about that for years, about it's important, yes, to retire from a job, but you need to know what you are retiring to. That is really, in many cases, more important than what you're retiring from. And so being able to sit down and think about, how am I going to spend my time? What does Monday through Friday look like? What does Monday through Saturday look like? What's the difference in the days of the week if you're not working anymore? And begin to plan that out. What I find is that people who have taken the time to find their purpose is they wonder how they ever had time to work, because they are so busy in retirement with things that they want to do and things that they enjoy that it's fine. But there are people who, they're not ever going to leave, and that's okay too. You've got to understand who you are. So I think it's time to do some introspective, thinking and planning here.
Your retirement should be more than an account balance. It really should. It should be more than just money, and it has to have purpose to it. And so whatever that might look like, and one of the things that I often counsel near-term retirees about doing is to phase into retirement. Try to step into this slowly, as opposed to like a light switch. It's on one day and then it's off one day.
Yeah.
That's a stark slap in the face for someone who's spent their life going and making a paycheck every day. And unless you're just physically worn out and you just want to kind of just slide into retirement very quietly and very purposefully, then you might think about that phased in retirement. We've often coined the phrase around here, work-tirement. It could be something that could be beneficial to you. You have heard the bell. That is notice that we have motored our mouths way too much, and it is time for our final thoughts. And Janet, I will leave the final thought first to you.
I'm going to spend a little bit more time on Roger from Fayetteville and this question about, should I keep working or just stay busy? I think that it's important to begin to think about finding what you're passionate about. And I kind of talked about that in terms of activities, but like, what really fuels you? What could be something that maybe in the past, maybe you would have wanted to do, but it wouldn't have paid the bills, and you can do it now, and begin to think about those things. And frankly, what's your legacy? What are you going to leave behind? And I don't mean inheritance in that, but What would your kids and grandkids point to as something that you did that made a difference? And begin to think through that, and whether or not that is something that you can still do while you're working, or whether it's something that's going to require a transition for you.
Janet, I think one of the first steps to being ready to retire is being financially independent. And you can get a checkup on whether you're financially independent or what you need to do to get to financial independence by texting the word STEPS to 501-381-5228. That's 501-381-5228. Text the word STEPS, STEPS, and we will send you our document, 7 Steps to Financial Independence. That will help you down the road, help you get ready for retirement. I will also say that retirement, whether it is a financial issue or an emotional issue, it is all about having clarity. And having clarity is what you get when you sit down with a financial advisor and work together on your plan. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Get Ready for the Future show. I guess it's kind of like riding a bike. We've done it so much that we can step in at any time. Scott will be back next week. For Janet Walker, I'm John Shrewsbury. Have a great Independence weekend.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.